This is the personal study of Jack and Barbara Willke. They've created a pro-life legacy of leadership, education, and activism that spanned over 4 decades. Today, we'll talk to Dr. Willke and others about this legacy. And we'll tell you about a new book that documents the history of the pro-life movement. And who better to write this book than the 2 people who have been at the epicenter of pro-life activity, not only throughout the United States, but around the globe. Stay with us for a very special 2-part program that looks at both the past of the pro-life movement and to its future. Jack and Barbara Willke were married for nearly 65 years, the parents to 6 children, 22 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. They never imagined the historic significance of their lives, with them being central to the development of a worldwide pro-life movement. In their early years, Jack was a 4th-generation family doctor, heavy in obstetrics, and Barbara was a nurse. Their impact on the pro-life movement started back when they were invited to speak at a conference for engaged couples.
So they were interested in married love. Well, we were a good example of that. And one of the lectures was sex. I would speak for 2 or 3 minutes and stop. Barb would pick it up for 2 or 3 minutes, kick it back to me, back and forth. And this turned out to be an extremely effective way to teach. And it was the husband-wife, loving cooperation of the 2 who presented an image of an idealistic marriage, and we were what we were talking about.
The Willkes were eventually asked to speak on sex education for children, and they began to look for teaching materials. Nothing existed at the time, so they wrote their first book, The Wonder of Sex. They printed the book themselves and sold over 300,000 copies. The Willkes continued traveling and speaking around the country on sex education until the 1970s, when they felt compelled to start sharing the pro-life message.
1970 rolled around, and here came a threat to legalize abortion. So we started lecturing on when does human life begin and what is abortion. Abortion is killing a baby.
A lot of people probably didn't know what abortion was.
Had no idea.
What was your plan of action as far as the leaders of the pro-life movement goes after Roe versus Wade came down?
Nobody thought it would be this bad, but here it was, abortion on request, no reason given, for the full 9 months of pregnancy, no appeal. It was absolute catastrophe. And we thought, well, we have to reverse this right now. And we were not successful in doing that.
But you didn't give up when things looked so bleak.
Oh, of course not. And we then knew within a few years that we hadn't known before, that contained within this single cell was the totality of this entire new human being. Then we told people the story of fetal development. And that made a huge difference in terms of whether or not abortion should be permitted or not.
The Willkes traveled around the country lecturing on abortion, adding powerful pictures and slides and sharing fetal development facts that proved to have a powerful impact on people. In 1971, their college-aged daughter Marie convinced them to write a book about the statistics, explanations, and methods of abortion. They all felt it would be a strong defense of the unborn. The Willkes' Handbook on Abortion took off and has sold 2.5 million copies and evolved over the years to be a global resource on abortion.
I was in college at the time, and professors were saying that abortion was fine. It was just a blob of cells. I came home for Christmas break, and I guess I was talking about this, and my parents were horrified, and they said, well, no, that's a baby. And I said, that's not a baby, it's just a mass of cells. And I started asking them questions, and they could answer everything I could raise. I went to bed that night and I thought, we're just being told things that aren't right, and nobody knows this information, and somehow my parents know it. I came down the next day and I said, why don't you write a book, just a real simple little book that you can hand out to people and just do questions and answers. And that was Handbook on Abortion.
We went into printing after printing after printing, and in a little more than the first year we sold 1 million copies. And that was English, but it was quickly translated into other languages, ultimately going into 22 language editions. We then were just deluged with requests to speak. We spoke more and more. We've probably spoken in every state a half a dozen times. And the kids seemed to realize that we really were doing something worthwhile.
Coming up, we'll hear about the new historic book that documents the history of the pro-life movement. Dr. Marie Myers Willke is the oldest of the Willke 6 children. She's now married with 4 children and 2 grandchildren of her own and practices internal medicine. Marie cherishes her childhood memories of growing up in the Willke household and never felt neglected by her busy globe-trotting parents.
It was busy. It was exciting. There were always people coming and going. We had a succession of pregnant girls living with us, and I have a couple sort of foster brothers who became part of the family. So it was sort of a sense that you were all in it together. You all did whatever you could do. It was a wonderful childhood.
Did you or your brothers or sisters ever realize that history was in the making during those early years when you were growing up?
I don't think we had any sense of it. You just thought, well, this needs to be done. I remember when the Supreme Court decision came down, Roe versus Wade, and there was gloom in the household. I remember they said, well, we'll take a few days and we'll be sad, and then we'll get to work. That was just the beginning, and the end never occurred to me that there was any history going on. It was just the right thing to do.
Marie was influential to the Handbook on Abortion being written, and now she's played a key role in her parents' new and final book, Abortion in the Pro-Life Movement, An Inside View. It offers an autobiographical look and unique frontline perspective of the history of the movement that only Dr. and Mrs. Willke could have documented.
This is an amazing book. It starts with ancient abortion history and goes through 2010. And it's Mom and Dad telling about the pro-life movement from the inside. They were in on all the meetings. They were, in on the strategizing. Some of it worked, some of it failed miserably, but they just lay it all out as to what happened and why, and they were key to so much of it. Each chapter is a year, and it tells what happens, and it goes through chronologically what happened that year. But all the stories are in there as well, and the stories are fascinating.
There were many pioneers in this movement. If we think of Nellie Gray, we think of many others who have contributed mightily to the pro-life movement and internationally, but none of them wrote the history of the movement. And we're the writing types, and so we did.
Mom and Dad were getting older, and I was over here helping them one day. And as I'm getting ready to leave, I said, now, is there anything else I can do to help you before I go? And Dad says, yeah, help me finish this book. They simply didn't have the push to finish it. I mean, they were in their late 80s by then, and they had always worked so hard, but they were slowing down. So I said, all right, give me the manuscript, let me look at it, because it just seems so important to them.
What has it been like working with your daughter on this project?
A real pleasure. Maria is a very sweetheart of a gal. She knows all about this. She's lived the life with me as she grew up. She's just a very brilliant, and I'll call her a young lady. She still looks quite young. And she's decided that the book is going to be published.
In a moment, we'll hear how the Willkes legacy, spanning 4 decades, is having an impact on others. Peggy Hartshorn is the president of Heartbeat International, a network of pregnancy resource centers. Peggy first got involved in the pro-life movement shortly after the Roe v. Wade decision. She was horrified by the rising number of legal abortions and felt compelled to get involved. Peggy was further convinced after seeing a Willkes slideshow presentation about the horrors of abortion.
My first response was really in the sense of, we need to do something in this country. The laws have to be changed. The Supreme Court decision has to be rethought. And I did know that there was a group called Right to Life. And I looked them up in the phone book. And the president of Columbus Right to Life happened to answer the phone when I called the office. He said, would you like to come over to our home and find out more about abortion? And the first thing that they showed us was the Willkes slide presentation, Life or Death. And so my initial initiation into the pro-life movement was because of the great work of Dr. and Mrs. Willke. After that meeting, the leaders asked me, would you be our education director? And so in the early days of the pro-life movement, one of the things that was most common was going out to groups, schools, colleges, church groups, and talking about when does human life begin and what is abortion. And so of course I used those slides many, many times in the first few years of my involvement in the pro-life movement as a person going out to really spread the truth.
Peggy, let's look at the evolution of the average Women Help Center, Crisis Pregnancy Center. They used to be run by all volunteers.
That's right.
That has changed, and now some are evolving into full-fledged clinics.
We've learned on the job, we've learned on the ground how to really do this work that God has given us. And one of the most effective tools that He has given us through the years has been the ultrasound machine, the sonogram. And it was back in the early 90s that it was recognized the effect of ultrasound in helping a mother bond with her baby. The irony of it, at that point, pregnancy centers were being attacked for being fake clinics. All right, so we thought, well, if they're going to call us fake clinics, which we're not, we're going to become real clinics. We will become medical clinics, have medical directors. Here we come with the wonderful pro-life OBGYNs and medical community, again came to our aid and have become medical directors of many of our pregnancy centers. And we've added other medical services as well, which women need. And yet, Brad, one thing has remained the same. And that is that we still, every day, we encounter women who need a person in their life to reach out to them with love and support.
The foundation is still love, eh?
Absolutely, the foundation is still love.
Hannah Bell is the founder and president of Hannah Bell Ministries, focused on awakening the younger generation to a life of purpose. Hannah partners with the Envision Conference to inspire young people to become empowered and impact their communities. Last year, Hannah spoke on the Texas House Bill 2 and was part of the pro-life rally supporting this major pro-life legislation that puts limits on late-term abortion and protects women's health. Hannah continues to be inspired and encouraged by the pro-life leaders who have come before her. We met in Austin, Texas at the Capitol at the pro-life rally. What is the one thing that you remember most about your experience there?
I think the one thing that I remember most is seeing a sea of people, both who were in opposition to the bill being passed and those who were taking a stand. And there was a contrasting difference. Those who were taking a stand and were saying enough's enough and we want to see life continue. And those who are broken, hurting, and lost and have believed a lie and wanted life at 20 weeks of age to not have existence. So all of that together painted this picture of a very historical moment in our state and in our nation, that there's two sides fighting a war.
Were you taken aback any at how the other side acted?
I was. When I got up to speak, there were individuals who closed in and were chanting and were pumping their fists against what I was saying. And the reality of it didn't shock me. It just made me realize that we have a lot of work to do. And that there's been an entire generation who has been in many ways brainwashed to believe that life in the womb is not significant.
What do you think are some of the strengths of the pro-life movement?
You have forefathers who have gone before us, like Dr. Willke. And I was reading a write-up about him recently, and it inspired me so much to see where my generation's place is in this movement and history. So he and his wife have set a standard, have set a tone, and have provided the foundation that we can now use going forward. I think the next thing you have is technology. So we have the sonograms now, where you can see the baby in the womb. I think thirdly would be the strategy. I think pro-lifers are becoming a lot more strategic and are learning how to be upfront and vocal, and are learning how to also work behind the scenes to change the tide of history. And sometimes it's successful and sometimes it's not. And there have been moments where it hasn't been, and it's hurt. Because a woman, I remember in particular, a lady left the pregnancy center that I tried to advise, and I knew that she was going to choose an abortion. The reality that her baby wouldn't have a choice, and that she would be, in the long run, hurt, devastated by making that decision, really gnawed at me. But with that, you keep plugging along. The pro-life movement, you have to be in it for the long haul. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon. And if I can change one life and inspire one person to dream again, inspire one person to keep their baby, it's all worth the moments where there were the valleys, because the valleys propel you to the mountaintop.
When we return, we'll hear cherished marriage advice from Dr. Willke. Sadly, Barbara Willke passed away on April 14, 2013 at the age of 90. She is deeply missed by her family, but her legacy continues to inspire pro-lifers across the globe. She leaves behind an awe-inspiring lifetime of protecting human life and educating pro-lifers. She and Jack were married nearly 65 years, and their relationship's a testament to the love they taught about and shared with their audiences. What do you think the secret is of having a successful marriage?
Well, first of all, a very real love for one another. And we decided that we'd never go to bed mad, not speaking to each other. And we followed that. So if we had a quarrel, and we had our share, before we went to bed at night, before we said our prayers together, we would, well, we'd look at the other one and we'd say, I know we disagree on this, but I still love you.
They were just so much in love and always showed it, always shared that with us. They were more of a single unit than two people. They just were one. The stability and the bedrock of that marriage was what powered everything else.
We all miss your mother tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of legacy do you think she's left behind for the pro-life movement?
She was half of this team. She was a really important half. She always supported Dad. Dad got more of the limelight than Mom did. He was the one out in front. But I don't think he could have done what he did without Mom. They were just utterly a team, and I think the devotion between the two of them was evident to people when they spoke. I think that was quite an example of what love is.
Another important legacy that I think that the Willkes have left for us is their longevity in the movement. We have to be long-distance runners, not sprinters. And in my mind, Dr. and Mrs. Willke are the perfect example of that. They never stopped running.
I think they basically led the pro-life movement for so many years. They wrote the language of the movement. We say baby instead of fetus because of what Mom and Dad wrote. They taught people how to present the case for the unborn. And they were just brilliant at that. I think just it was an amazing gift that they were willing to share.
Join us next week for part 2 of this insightful program, where we'll learn how Dr. Willke continued his pioneering pro-life education with the founding of Life Issues Institute. We'll also hear some of his favorite stories from the new book, and we'll learn how the younger generation can take up the torch and make a difference in putting an end to abortion. You won't want to miss it. This week, my special gift to you is this remarkable book about the journey of protecting the sanctity of life. Abortion and the Pro-Life Movement, An Inside View offers powerful stories and history from the mother and father of the pro-life movement. Visit our website at facinglife.tv to enter for your chance to receive one as my gift to you while supplies last. Once there, check out the available resources related to this program and find out how you can order a copy of this special 2-part episode on DVD and Blu-ray to share with others.